So what are the things that happened after the Indigo Rebellion, the Blue Rebellion took place? So they were under a lot of pressure. The indigo cultivators, they were not even getting profits. Their soil was getting very, very infertile because of the consistency of the indigo plantation. It took fertility of the soil. Of course, they were shifting from their staple cultivation, that was rice cultivation, and they were not very willing to do that. They were not getting even profit out of having indigo plantations, and they were under huge burdens of loans from the money lenders and from the Britishers to produce this indigo. They had to produce indigo in 25% of the lands, which they did not like. The coercive nature of this British policy, they did not like. So to to avoid any other possibility of another 1857 revolt that happened in just 2 years back, in 1859, the Britishers, they thought that this is not going well. What is going wrong here? The rebellions, they would not just revolt one fine day. They would just woke up and they'll start thinking that, okay, I'm going to revolt now. No, it must have started by some or the other support. What kind of support did they get that they actually went in the ground to revolt? Basically, they had the support of two major and strong backing. First was the village headman, who was also coerced into signing the contracts and who was mobilizing all these groups into coming together and revolting against the Britishers. First was the village headman here, and the second was zamindar. So basically, if you are in charge of some place, you are administrating it, you are controlling some place, you have some people working under you, and then another authority comes and they barge in and they just make a policy that they have to work under then peasants. They had to work under the Britishers now. So the zamindars, they were also enraged by this, and they were also not liking the authority that the British were possessing over them. So they also mobilized people into revolting against the Britishers, the East India Company. The Luttials, which were sent by the Britishers, they were beaten up by the villagers and they grew in revolt every day. The Britishers, they did not want another 1857. So they tried each and every way to pacify these people. They tried to, make these people calm about the situation, not go on revolting. So they tried to send their army to pacify these people. A commission was set up. It is called as the Indigo Commission. So the commission was set up to look into the problems of the indigo cultivators. The indigo cultivators, they also had a little hope that the Britishers would support them because they had promised their support. So this Indigo Commission was seen as a ray of hope by them. This Indigo Commission, of course, came as a ray of hope because Lord Ashley, who was a sitting judge, he found the planters guilty and criticized them for the coercive measures that they used on the peasants, on the cultivators. And it also gave the Riots the right to refuse to produce indigo. Basically, they had to produce whatever was there in the contract until the contract was there. And after that contract, they could refuse, that they would not produce indigo anymore. This was seen by the Riots as a support from the Queen Victoria itself, that she had interfered in this and she had come to our rescue. So basically, this was seen as a positive support from the British, whereas the Britishers, they were just trying to pacify the situation. They were just trying to hold back the possibility of another revolt. So that is what happened in the Indigo Commission. Let's move on. Now, what happened after the Blue Rebellion? Was the indigo cultivation completely stopped? Were the Britishers not interested in the indigo cultivation anymore? No, that did not happen. They shifted from Bengal to Bihar. So if they could not occupy one area, now we know that after some time the Britishers, they had a huge territory under their control, not just the Diwani of Bengal. They had a huge territory of India. They had annexed a huge area of India under their control. So basically, then they shifted to Bihar, and then they coerced the Bihari peasants. Then they coerced the peasants from Bihar to work in the indigo plantation. But at the same time, as I said earlier, synthetic dye started being produced. So the production of synthetic dye kind of substituted the demand for the Indian indigo, the raw Indian indigo, the natural Indian indigo that was there, because synthetic dye was easier to procure and it was easier to manufacture, and then it was also cheap. than the Indian indigo. So it reduced the demand of the Indian indigo. And that is why the farmers, the peasants who were cultivating indigo crops in Bihar, they suffered a huge loss. Of course, their plants, their land were being infertile, and on top of that, now their production was not even demand. They were not even getting minimum a minimum requirement, a minimum pay that they were supposed to be given by the British. So this also marks the entrance of Gandhiji into the modern Indian politics, the modern India, which we say that happened after the commencement of the organization, the Quit India movement, the freedom struggle happened. This is called as the modern India. So Mahatma Gandhi's visit to Champaran in 1917 marked the beginning of the Champaran movement against the indigo planters. Some of the indigo planters, along with Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who was our ex-president, they approached Gandhiji to have interference in whatever was happening, the situation that was there in the Champaran. In Champaran, there was indigo plantation, and indigo planters were not getting paid by the Britishers. Of course, their indigo was also not getting sold because synthetic dye was there now, and their land was also becoming infertile. So they wanted justice, and then they brought Mahatma Gandhi into picture. Gandhiji then went there and they had this protest again along with the people of Bihar. He was also was also sent to jail, but after some time the Britishers, they sought to the demands of Gandhiji, and proper remunerations were given to the peasants of Bihar. The campaign was huge success, and it also marked the commencement of the Gandhian era, in the Indian freedom struggle. Let's see the questions now. Match the following: Riots, Mahal, Nij, and Ryoti. So we know that Mahal means village. Then we have Nij. Nij meant the cultivation on planters' own land. Then Riot. Riot means the peasants. And Ryoti means the cultivation on farmers' lands. One second. I think there has been a mistake. No, I'm sorry, there has been no mistake. Of course, I was confused between what is Ryoti and Ryot called. I thought the Ryotis were the peasants, but no, Ryoti was the cultivation on farmers' lands, and Ryot were called peasants. But of course, they were not called Ryot in the whole area of India. They were called by different names at different places. Let's move on to question 2. Fill in the blanks. Growers of woad in Europe. Woad was the dye which was used as a substitute in Europe. In Europe, woad was produced, like in India, indigo was produced. So, as a crop which would provide competition to their earnings. So, indigo. Indian indigo. So, in this era, it happened that when the Europeans and the other markets that were there, the French market was there, the Spanish market was there, all these people in the Caribbean also, the woad was cultivated there. So these people, they demanded a ban of the Indian indigo at that time, because Indian indigo was dominating the market and it was being sold at very high prices, and these people who were cultivating woad were getting very low prices. Their woad was not even getting sold in the market, because the wood was not very superior in quality. It did not give a very rich texture. But after some time, when the people, they did not shift to wood, rather they also saw that Indian indigo had a great finish, had a very superior quality. Then these people, they retracted back their demand to ban the Indian indigo. They came back to the Indian indigo. The demand for indigo increased in the late 18th century Britain, because there are a lot of reasons for that. The demand for indigo also increased in the late 18th century Britain because there were two reasons. The two reasons that are there for the demand for increase of the demand of the indigo production was, first, you can write here. First was because the supply from the west decreased. And the second is that the wood, the substitute that was there, the wood, was not a good quality dye. So that is why, because of these two reasons, first, the supply from the West decreased drastically because of the rebellions that were going on for the abolishment of slavery. That is why the dye could not come from there. So the dye, so the Indian indigo was in great demand in the Britain. Also, the local produce of the wood that was there, the wood cultivators, they saw a decrease in their product, in decrease in selling their products, because their product could not give a very rich blue color. There was a very faded color, because of which it was not much in demand. The indigo, that is why, was in much demand. The international demand for indigo was affected by the discovery of synthetic dye. The Champaran movement was against the Britishers. Britishers who were the indigo planters. Sorry. Basically, here it's better if we write the indigo planters. I don't know what is happening. Let's just. So the Champaran movement was against the Britishers vis-a-vis those who were the indigo planters. It is better if we write indigo planters here. Question 3 is, describe the main features of the permanent settlement. So the permanent settlement promised a lot of things. Permanent settlement first was introduced by Lord Cornwallis. The answer which we should write, how we should go about answer writing in history, is first we write about who introduced it and at what year it was introduced, and then we write that what was the preconditions that happened before the implementation of that policy. So before the permanent settlement, we all know that random revenues were given without assessment, without a proper assessment and uniform revenue plan. Random revenues were taken from the peasants, and that is why the peasants were exploited at a great level. Famine struck in the West Bengal. Thousands of people died, and because of which the British income in the form of revenue was decreased. So basically, permanent settlement was introduced when Lord Cornwallis was Governor General. In this settlement, a fixed amount of money, an amount of money was fixed, which was to be given by the zamindars. The zamindars were the rajas and the local talukdars who were there. They were called as zamindars, and now these zamindars were in charge of taking this revenue from the peasants. So basically, Britishers, the East India Company officers, they were not directly in contact with the peasants. Rather, they were in contact with the zamindars who were supposed to take revenue from a fixed amount of revenue from the peasants, and then the zamindars were supposed to give a fixed amount of revenue to the Britishers. This is the second quality. The third feature is, no matter whatever happened, no matter is there any profit or loss, no matter whatever is there, the fixed amount of revenue has to be given to the Britishers as the revenue. The fixed amount of revenue was settled to the zamindars as well as these, and the peasants, they suffered a great deal because of that, because their land was not assessed. Like, not all lands could produce same kind of products. Not all land could produce the same kind of crops. Their land was not assessed before introducing the permanent settlement, and because of which many of the people and the revenue which was set was very high. Because of this high revenue demand, the peasants sometimes could not suffice to that, and they could not give this to zamindars. Of course, when the zamindars, they were not able to take revenue, their zamindari was auctioned off. This is the fourth feature. I'm sorry. This was the fourth feature, that their zamindari was auctioned off when the zamindars were not able to pay to the Britishers the fixed amount that was there. No matter how much benefit the zamindars are getting from the cultivators, they were supposed to give only a permanent settlement which was there to the Britishers. So no matter how much, at some point of time, the revenue actually expanded, the cultivation actually expanded, but it was not of any profit to the Britishers, because that revenue was going directly into the pockets of the zamindars. Not even the peasants were getting any profit. Also, it was supposed to improve the conditions of the land, but it did not improve the conditions of the land, because the extra that was fetching the zamindars the profit, they were not putting it in the improvement of the land. So basically the land could not be improved as well. The question 4 is, how was the mahalvari system different from the permanent settlement? In mahalvari system, the land was assessed, and according to that assessment, all the lands that were there in an area, in a mahal, in a village, mahal was called a village. In a village, all kinds of land that was there, they were assessed, and according to that assessment, according to the fertility of the land and the crops they could produce, that was the basis for the fixed for the revenue that they were supposed to give. So if the produce was less, they were supposed to give a less revenue or high revenue, but the revenue which was basically fixed was a very high kind of revenue. It was very, very high revenue, which were the mahalvari people were also not it was not feasible for them to give this kind of revenue. The village headman, no, not here, the village headman was not introduced here. The permanent settlement had a fixed kind of revenue. This also suggested that, no, I was wrong, the village headman was in picture here, I'm sorry. This was the first quality here. The second quality was, rather than zamindars, the village headman was given the opportunity to, fetch the revenue from the people, from the cultivators, from the peasants, and they were to give this revenue to the Britishers. Also, another thing was that the revenue was not fixed. Rather, it was supposed to be revised at each and every situation, and accordingly the revenue was that time the revenue was fixed at a certain limit, but that limit was also very high, and it could not made the peasants very happy about that, because it was not feasible for them to pay that kind of money. This was supposed to abolish the role of the zamindars, but the village headmen eventually handled the roles of zamindar actually. So this was different in a very little bit sense, because the permanent settlement, it did not have an assessed system. Rather, it introduced a fixed amount of money that was supposed to be given as a revenue by the farmers, and it also had zamindars in an absolute role. So zamindars were there who were supposed to fetch the revenue from the farmers, and they were supposed to give it to the Britishers. So that was also there. In this system, the revenue was not subject to revision. Rather, a fixed revenue was set, which could not even change in the future. So that was the difference between permanent settlement and the mahalvari system. Give 2 problems which arose with the new monroe system of fixing revenue. The monroe system was also known as the Riots system. The monroe system had certain drawbacks. Like first, before it was the village headman was there in the as a kind of middleman between the Britishers and the farmers. But this system, rather than giving the village headman any role, this system was to introduce a different thing from the permanent settlement. So basically, in this system, the land was surveyed properly, assessment was made, and according to that assessment, the revenue was fixed of that area, and it was also on a scale of revision. So basically, the British people who were in authority at that time when this system was initiated, they thought that they had to be there as a father figure. They had to protect these people. And of course, this was this monroe system, it started happening on a very small scale. So what happened, it was tried on a very small scale. I don't know why this keeps happening. It happened on a very small scale. After the Britishers, they fought Tipu Sultan and they won. They came victorious. Then the land which was annexed by them in that time, they started monroe system on that land, the Riots system on that land, because they came to know that these were the settlements that were not owned by one kind of people. It was very traditional system where it was owned by small pieces were owned by the Riots. So that is why they, rather than taking the middlemen into the picture, they directly contacted with the Riots, and the Riots were supposed to directly give the money to the Britishers. But after a certain period of time, the officers which came subsequently, they moved the revenue to a very high price, and of course those prices were it was not feasible for the peasants, it was not feasible for the Riots to pay that kind of revenue. So basically it had a good intention in mind, for fixing revenue, but it could not suffice. Why were Riots reluctant to grow indigo? Because it clashed with their rice plantations. Indigo also demanded use of plows and use of labor, and all the labors and the plows were driven into the rice plantation. So basically, they did not want to substitute the rice plantation for indigo. It made the soil very, very infertile. The indigo plantation made the soil very infertile, because of which they did not want indigo plantation to be there. It was forced upon them by the Britishers. There were two systems, as we have seen. In the niche cultivation, the planters themselves owned the land and they started producing. But in the Riots system, the Riots were supposed to grow on the 25% of their land this indigo plantation, and that kind of cursive did not worked well with them. Of course, then again, their indigo was bought at a very, very cheap price, because of which they could not even gain any profit, and their field was also getting infertile over a period of time, and that kind of infertile that even rice plantation, any kind of plantation, could not take place. So that happened at that time, and that is why the Riots were very, very reluctant to grow indigo. Question 7 is, what were the circumstances which led to the eventual collapse of indigo production in Bengal? So basically the main thing that happened was the revolt, the Blue Rebellion, as it is called, in 1859. The Blue Rebellion happened because the Riots and all the people which were there, the indigo cultivators which were there, they were coerced into having this indigo cultivation, and because of which their fields were growing very, very infertile. Of course, their rice plantation was taking a hit, and that did not go well with them. They were also not given proper kind of money because of that. They were forced to grow 25% on the 25% of their land, this indigo plantation. And most of all, this indigo production in Bengal had, we can call that a rampant, corruption, because they were given a very cheap kind of money, but the masters used to gain a huge profit out of indigo plantation. So because of all these circumstances, the Riots and the indigo cultivators were very, very reluctant.